Hi, and welcome to GreenBiz Studio. I'm Pete May, co-founder of GreenBiz, and I'm delighted to be here today with Youssef Mestari, who's General Manager for Sustainability and Energy Efficiency Solutions at Honeywell Buildings Technologies. Youssef, welcome to GreenBiz Studio.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Pete. Thanks for having me here.
Great to have you here. So I was looking at your background, and you've done a few different things at Honeywell. I always like to start by asking, how did you end up leading sustainability for buildings technologies?
Yeah, I think this is where the chance, I would say, opportunity meets passion. I was always being very sustainability oriented in my house in terms of how we drive and how we consume energy. And I started with Honeywell from the strategy and marketing side, and then moved into developing breakthrough ideas and initiatives around augmented reality. And from there on, it became sort of a chief marketing officer for building technologies. And part of my role was to define what are the growth vectors and the new businesses we should be investing resources and development. And this is how one thing led to another, and I became the GM for the sustainability business.
Yeah, interesting. So that really gets into the impact of building decarbonization. Obviously, that's a big topic. But one thing happened in the middle for all of our careers. There was a pandemic, and the pandemic changed things. Talk a little bit about building decarbonization now. It was pursuing one path pre-pandemic, and I'm sure it's evolved in the last 18 months or so. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is a very interesting time. As you said, before the pandemic, it was really focused on energy efficiency, cost. And how can we reduce the cost? And how can we have a shorter payback time? And it was all about prioritization of initiatives that will have the shortest payback time and the highest saving in terms of energy. And that was the only outcome that a building manager, building owners, or a facility manager cared about. Well, after the pandemic, the health of the occupant and healthy building became more dominant as an outcome than energy efficiency. They didn't want to compromise the health of people for the sake of energy savings. But now you have like those two outcomes competing against each other in a building, because if you want to have a healthy building, you have to increase your outdoor air intake and take out the indoor air outside as much as possible. But by doing so, you consume more energy because you have to bring that outdoor into the level of temperature inside the building. So therefore, you will consume more energy if you run a healthy mode, but you will consume less energy, but you're not going to be healthy if you run efficiency mode. So this is a very interesting time where you'd see machine learning, artificial intelligence, where you have multiple sensors that reads all this data coming from the buildings, coming from the occupant, and how people move and use the building, and use that data to choose the right outcome to optimize at any given point of time, and having that intelligent system or sort of an intelligent building that adapts the outcome to optimize for based on how is it being utilized and how many people are in the room.
Yeah. So are you saying that through technology, then you can kind of harmonize decarbonization on the one hand and healthy buildings on the other?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And what patterns have you seen with your customers in terms of their buildings? Obviously, I'm in downtown Oakland. I'm in our office today, and there's only a couple of people here, and most of the buildings alongside us in downtown Oakland, they've been pretty empty. What are you seeing? What trends are you seeing during the pandemic with your customers along this lines of decarbonization and healthy buildings, given that many of them are not yet back in the workforce?
Absolutely, this is a fast-growing trend of it was a wave of awareness in the corporate world about how the mandate of every company to become more sustainable and provide a healthier environment, a controlled environment for their workforce. And therefore, we've seen an uptake in terms of need for solutions that are retrofit solutions, sort of changing things that were old and they were like run over time, but there are also solutions and more needs for high-tech solutions, innovation solutions using a lot of sensors, data collections, and taking some machine learnings, comparing buildings against each other, knowing what are the outliers between buildings, taking specific recommendations on terms of how would you deploy capex or money to achieve the biggest impact in terms of energy savings, in terms of healthy environment. And we've seen a lot of traction around that, and it's a fascinating space to be in right now.
Yeah. So last question. Fast forward. There was a lot of interesting talk about the building of the future pre-pandemic. I think it's even more greater question. Whatever we are post-pandemic or in the pandemic. But what do you see the building in the future? What trends? What does that look like? And how does innovation and sustainability play into that?
I see three mega trends for the building of the future, and that will shape the landscape of buildings in the future. Number one is how a building merges into its space and its environment, having more natural light, having more open spaces, and having the flow between outside and inside. There is no more limits, and that breaking the barrier between outside and inside allow you to control better the air, control better the sunlight and the heat and the cooling in the buildings, and also sort of how the experience is provided to the occupants. Number two is about having an impact with no trace. So that net zero building is the target for to achieve for all the buildings, regardless of the verticals, whether it's data centers, hospitals, hotels. They all have to come to that net zero targets, and therefore leaving no trace in the environment, and therefore having those solutions around demand side, how we can reduce the demand, and on supply side, how we can generate energy so to make the building self-sustainable and off-the-grid solutions. The third disruption or we would see in the future is mostly around a sort of an intelligent building similar to a self-driving car. A self-driving car drive in a space. An intelligent building will be driving in time. And over time, during the night, during the day, when there are people, when there are not people, and so on and so forth, how the building is able to adapt, to create shades, to increase cooling, to refresh the air. But how can we move smartly and automatically like a self-driving car? That's a future state that we will see pretty, I'd say in the next 20 years.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. It's going to be really fascinating. Sitting here where we are now, it's going to be fascinating in 3 or 4 months when we see, or whatever that is, that companies start to come back, and then several years as these trends start to play out. But Youssef Mestari, thank you for joining us here today, Honeywell. Thanks for joining us here today on GreenBiz Studio.
Thanks, Pete. It was a pleasure.